I have brought a truthful account that became unjust by being treated as complete. It is a ship's log, not one of mine, though I have read enough of them to know the species, noon position, wind, sail, sickness, punishment, stores. On the day in question, the master wrote that a seaman refused duty during dangerous weather, answered insolently, and was confined. Every statement was true. The weather was dangerous. The order was given. The man refused. His words were insubordinate. He was confined. The account omitted that the preceding watch had worked him nearly senseless, that he had reported a split in the rigging, that the mate dismissed him, and that the order would have sent him directly beneath the failure he had named. The log became the official memory because it was written in the proper hand, at the proper hour, in the proper book. Truth acquired rank and crushed truth without rank.
Then the injustice did not begin with a false sentence.
No, that is what troubles me. A falsehood offers a clean adversary. This was a set of accurate entries with a murderous perimeter.
A medical chart may do the same. I brought one from memory rather than paper. A wounded soldier was described as irritable, resistant to examination, and non-compliant with treatment. Accurate, each word. He struck away a hand. He refused laudanum. He would not lie still. But the chart did not say that the first person to touch him had approached from the side where he could not see, or that he had awakened twice beneath hands, cutting clothing from his body, or that another man in the ward had died while calling for his mother. The chart made his terror into temperament. Thereafter, every flinch confirmed the first description.
Was the omission culpable at the time, or only in consequence?
You ask that as though consequence were an unfortunate visitor who arrived after the writing.
I ask, because our humane record will fail if it requires every recorder to possess facts not yet available.
And it will fail more quickly if ignorance is allowed to masquerade as completion. The writer need not know the whole cause of a man's fear. He can write, cause unknown to me, he can write. Patient reports that touch without warning is intolerable. He can distinguish what he saw from what he inferred.
And distinguish what was necessary for treatment from what was merely vivid enough to preserve. Records are greedy when they discover the authority of detail.
Quite. I have brought my own example, and it is less comfortable because I was the author. I once described a man as repeatedly present near the scene of thefts, evasive under questioning, acquainted with the building, and in unexplained possession of money. All true. I meant the account as a working hypothesis. Another reader treated it as a verdict in installments. The man lost his position before I discovered that he had been visiting his estranged daughter, who worked nearby, and that the money was hers, entrusted to him because her husband took her wages. My observations were accurate. My confidence was calibrated privately. The page did not preserve the calibration.
Then the identifier pointed, but the reader mistook it for a container.
Yes, a record may point to observations, inferences, and uncertainties. It does not contain the person. Yet institutions behave as if a sufficiently indexed accumulation becomes the person by approximation.
My account is an imperial petition. A provincial official was accused of delaying grain, imposing unauthorized levies, and speaking contemptuously to petitioners. The investigation confirmed each charge. I approved his removal. Years later, another report showed that he had delayed the grain because the storehouses were wet, levied labor to repair them when funds failed to arrive, and dismissed petitioners harshly because fever had taken half his household and he had not slept. None of this makes contempt just. nor does saving grain authorize an unlawful levy. Yet the completed record made him merely corrupt, and the later explanation threatened to make him secretly heroic. Both accounts competed to possess him. Neither permitted the mixed judgment. He prevented one harm through acts that caused others, under pressures that explain without absolving.
Mine concerns biography. A physician made a diagnosis in confidence, and years afterward the diagnosis entered an account of his patient's life. The biographer verified that the consultation occurred and that the diagnosis was written. The fact was genuine, its use was indecent, it became a key offered for every locked door in the subject's character. Quarrel became a symptom, a political opinion became compensation, a marriage became pathology. The diagnosis, perhaps useful for 1 hour between doctor and patient, was promoted into a theory of the whole man.
There is an additional injury there. The dead cannot refuse the examination.
Nor can they amend the vocabulary by which their century misunderstood them.
We have 5 varieties already: omission, inference hardened into identity, loss of confidence metadata, explanation mistaken either for excuse or irrelevance, and a fact used beyond the purpose for which it was gathered.
Purpose that belongs near the beginning of the design. Before a record receives content, it should state what promise it is trying to keep.
A promise to whom?
A captain's log promises navigational continuity, accountability to owners, evidence for courts, and memory for the next watch. Those promises may conflict. If one page pretends to satisfy them all, the strongest reader decides what the page meant.
Put down the claim one is tagging. This entry records an immediate safety decision. This entry preserves testimony for later review. This entry warns the next clinician of a risk, not simply record of John Smith. The latter title is an invitation to totality.
I would add, this is what the writer needed to know or communicate at this time. The boundary should be visible.
Useful, but susceptible to ritual. A clerk will copy the phrase into every form until it means nothing.
Any humane sentence can be killed by becoming boilerplate. That is not an argument against the sentence. It is an argument for designing consequences around it.
What consequence?
If a record made for immediate treatment is later used to deny employment, the later user must justify the transfer. The burden should lie with the person extending the record's reach, not with the recorded person, to prove that an old note has become irrelevant.
A transfer ledger.
Provenance not only of origin but of travel. Who created the account, for what purpose, from which sources, under what constraints? Then who carried it elsewhere, for what new purpose, and what authority permitted that move?
Chain of custody for meaning.
With a warning that custody does not preserve meaning unchanged. A bloodstain sealed in a vial remains chemically itself. A sentence moved from a bedside chart to a tribunal acquires a different force even if no word changes.
So each use is an act, not passive reading.
Yes, reading consequentially should leave a wake.
There is a phrase worth keeping.
Keep it as a phrase, not as evidence that Hall has always held the doctrine.
Thank you, Holmes. I should dislike being made exemplary before luncheon.
You see the temptation, though. A good phrase behaves like a magnet. Soon the life is arranged around it.
Then our design must resist the hunger for a single moral. What fields does the record require?
First, observations. They should be as close as practicable to sensory or documentary fact. He declined the order at 14:10, not he was defiant.
Second, the person's own account, in their own words where possible, not as a decorative quotation beneath the official version, but as testimony with equal visibility.
Third, context known at the time, including material constraints, length of watch, condition of rigging, who had authority, what alternatives were available.
Fourth, judgment, It must not hide. I judged the refusal dangerous. I judged confinement necessary. Accountability weakens when decisions dress themselves as facts.
Fifth, uncertainty and absent voices. Not merely unknown, but the mate was not interviewed. The patient could not speak. The accused person had not yet seen the allegation. Absence has a shape.
Sixth, consequence. What happened because of the entry? Not only to the case, but to the person. Dismissal, confinement, altered treatment, increased observation, reputational circulation.
Seventh, amendment. Not correction as replacement. An addition that stands beside the earlier entry and says what changed, who changed it, and why.
With the earlier version preserved,
Usually, injury must not be erased merely because a better account arrived.
Usually is doing important work.
It is. Some details should never have been collected. Some expose another victim. Some are intimate facts whose continued availability serves curiosity, not accountability. Preservation cannot mean universal display.
We must separate retention from access.
And access from authority. A sealed record may remain available to a narrow reviewer without being permitted to govern an ordinary encounter.
a ship may retain the old log because the inquiry must know what the captain wrote, but the seaman's future berth should not open with that log nailed to the mast.
Then what does the future employer see?
Perhaps nothing, unless the old event bears materially on the new duty and a current review confirms the relevance.
We have reached the difficult phrase, materially relevant. Who judges?
Not solely the institution that benefits from remembering.
Nor solely the person who benefits from forgetting.
A small council, then? Record keeper, affected person, and an independent custodian?
Councils reproduce power with extra chairs, but the tripartite structure has merit if disagreement is itself preserved.
The aim is not to manufacture consensus. It is to prevent one perspective from acquiring the costume of completion.
And to permit refusal, a person may decline to explain the worst afternoon of his life again. Silence is not an invitation to scrutiny,
Nor evidence of guilt.
nor evidence of healing.
Nor proof that the record no longer wounds.
This raises a question. If the person declines to add an account, how do we avoid leaving the official entry uncontested?
Mark the opportunity and the refusal without interpreting it. Invited to respond. Declined. No inference authorized.
The final sentence is aspirational. Readers infer.
Then make unauthorized inference procedurally expensive. Require any consequential reader to name the inference and accept responsibility for it.
There it is again. Judgment must leave a wake.
A humane record cannot make people virtuous. It can make the exercise of power visible.
Visibility itself may become punishment. Imagine every official compelled to append every suspicion and moral hesitation. We would create an archive of shadows, each technically disclaimed and practically ineradicable.
Correct. Therefore, hypotheses require expiration unless renewed by evidence.
You would put a date on suspicion?
Certainly. We date medicines. Why should an inference have an immortal prescription? Working hypothesis, valid for this inquiry until reviewed. If unconfirmed, it remains in the provenance layer, but falls out of the active account.
Active account, archived beneath current surface above.
Yet the surface must not imply innocence if injury was real.
No. Suppose a man assaulted another in rage. 20 years of honorable conduct do not make the assault imaginary, but neither does the assault retain automatic jurisdiction over every present decision.
We should be precise about the right to outgrow. It is not a right to be declared harmless. It is a right to have present judgment, consider present evidence,
And a right not to be narrated forever at the temperature of the original event.
That may be the heart of it, Records freeze weather. A storm entry remains storm dark even after the sea changes. We need a way to say, this happened, this injured, this was the finding, this is what has happened since. These are the obligations that remain. These are the powers the old record no longer possesses.
Obligations that remain. Restitution, warning, care for the injured, perhaps limits on access to certain powers.
And the injured person's account must not be edited into a redemption story they did not consent to join.
The person who caused harm may outgrow the act without being owed a reconciled victim.
Nor may evidence of growth be manufactured from the victim's exhaustion. Failure to continue protesting is not absolution.
Then we require parallel records that need not resolve into one narrative.
A braid rather than a verdict.
A braid suggests harmony. Some strands remain opposed.
A dossier with declared perspectives sounds colder, but perhaps coldness is useful here. The warmth should reside in rights and conduct, not metaphor.
I object only because dossiers invite accumulation. Every anecdote becomes admissible once a folder exists.
Then call it a bounded record. Its borders matter as much as its contents.
What lies outside the border?
Anything not required by the stated promise. If we are recording a safety incident, we do not need the person's failed marriage, political opinions, childhood nickname, or every previous quarrel merely because they make a compelling profile.
Unless one bears causally on the incident.
There is your dangerous door.
All doors are dangerous if no one guards them. Causality sometimes requires history.
And investigators are remarkably talented at discovering that whatever they already possess bears causally on whatever they are examining.
Then require a written relevance claim before admitting it.
Specific enough to be challenged. Prior event admitted because it shows X under conditions Y, not for context. Context is the empire's favorite borderless province.
And if the relevance claim fails,
the material returns to restricted provenance, and the failed claim remains attached to the reader, not the subject.
Good. Failed scrutiny should accumulate around the scrutinizer when warranted. Too often, each new investigation leaves residue only on the investigated.
That is true in medicine. A patient may have 6 notes saying, "Rule out malingering," and none saying that 5 clinicians ruled it out. Suspicion reproduces. This evaporates.
Then negative findings must be first-class amendments.
Not merely appended at the bottom, where no hurried reader reaches them.
We need a current synopsis generated from the full provenance but not allowed to overwrite it.
generated by whom?
There is the problem again.
Perhaps no single synopsis. A consequential decision should receive a small packet. The original finding, the affected person's current statement if offered, the injury account where relevant and permitted, subsequent evidence, unresolved disagreement, and explicit decision scope.
That could become intolerably long.
Efficiency is not innocent when it decides whose complexity is removed.
Nor is volume humane. Burying a correction in 200 pages is a form of erasure.
Headroom, then. The record must reserve room for what may arrive later without demanding that every reader absorb the archive. A compact surface with visible seams and direct paths downward.
What must always remain on the surface?
The fact that the surface is incomplete.
The purpose and date of the current view.
Any active restriction and its justification.
Any material amendment that changes how the original event should be understood.
Any continuing injury or unpaid obligation.
And the next review date, otherwise temporary, becomes a euphemism for permanent.
A review date is useless without a presumption. On expiration, does the restriction continue until reviewed, or lapse unless renewed?
The answer should depend on the risk. A restriction preventing immediate grave harm may continue briefly. A reputational warning should lapse unless affirmatively justified.
Then every retained consequence needs a decay rule proportionate to its danger.
You are giving moral memory a half-life.
Not the event, the authority granted to the event.
That distinction is essential. Memory does not decay by decree. Institutional permission to act on memory can.
And sometimes should strengthen. Repeated conduct may convert an isolated account into a pattern.
Provided repetition is not merely the repeated copying of one allegation.
100 citations may have one ancestor.
Provenance reveals whether we have a forest or one tree reflected in many windows.
There is another danger. A person may perform reform for the record. Apologies optimized for fields. Therapy attendants entered as tokens. Good conduct translated into compliance, because only legible growth counts.
A valid concern, though unverifiable growth cannot be given equal evidentiary weight.
I did not say equal. I said the schisma will shape behavior. If the only recognized amendment is institutional certification, the poor, private, skeptical, and unconventional will have less access to redemption.
Then allow several kinds of evidence. Conduct over time, testimony from affected communities, fulfilled obligations, self-account, absence of recurrence, and demonstrated response when similar pressures return.
The last is powerful and perilous. We must not stage temptations merely to test whether someone has changed.
Agreed. Naturally occurring evidence only, unless the person knowingly consents to an assessment whose stakes are declared.
We are designing not a machine that knows the soul, but a practice that limits what records may claim.
And that sentence should govern the whole thing.
Let us test it against injury. Suppose a keeper of funds steals from the community in one desperate afternoon, later repays every coin, discloses the act, and lives honestly for 10 years. May he keep funds again?
Possibly with controls. The old act remains materially relevant because the duty is identical.
But once a thief, always a thief is not a control.
Nor is repayment absolution. Who lacked medicine or food while the money was absent?
The current record should say all of it. Act, motive if known, injury, restitution, decade of conduct, conditions of recurrence, present safeguards, and the reasoning behind restored or withheld trust.
Now alter one fact. He stole because his child needed medicine.
Explanation changes moral judgment, not the physical account.
It should also change what the community records about itself. If a member had to steal to obtain a child's medicine, the record that names only his breach is unjustly complete.
Yes, the system enters the event as a participant.
Systems make excellent faceless defendants. The system failed can become a fog in which no person answers.
Then name both. The keeper chose theft. The treasurer denied emergency aid. The policy excluded his case. The council failed to review the policy. Responsibility may be distributed without being dissolved.
That gives us an accountability graph rather than a solitary subject.
Provided people are not reduced to nodes.
A graph is a representation of relations, Watson, not a metaphysical claim.
I know what a graph is, Holmes. I also know how swiftly a useful representation acquires the manners of reality.
Point retained.
There is something almost comic in our effort. We begin by protesting that a record cannot contain a person, then respond by adding more fields.
Perhaps the humane quality lies not in completeness, but in disciplined incompleteness.
A record should know what it cannot know.
And should sometimes stop asking.
Stopping is not always mercy. An unexamined injury favors whoever already controls the account.
I said sometimes. You hear restraint as the enemy of truth, because truth has so often needed your persistence, but inquiry can make refusal responsible for the atmosphere. If every silence becomes a clue, the silent person is still doing labor for the investigation.
I understand the objection.
Understanding is not yet a design.
Then design this. The record states which questions were authorized, by whom, and for what stakes. Material gathered outside that warrant cannot quietly migrate inward. Refusal is recorded only when the question itself was legitimate, and the fact of refusal affects procedure. No motive is assigned. No investigator may extend the inquiry merely because refusal aroused curiosity.
A warrant for attention.
And a discipline for the one attending.
Would you submit your own deductions to it?
If they become consequential records, yes. Private thought is free, power is not.
That is a distinction I can live beside.
Beside, not inside.
Let the record show that proximity is not incorporation.
Should show less than that. A jest need not become doctrine, because it occurred near our design.
Marcus rescues us from our own minute.
Minutes are among the most dangerous records. They convert living disagreement into grammatical sequence. The chair recognizes, the motion carries, and hesitation vanishes.
Then a humane minute records not every utterance but the structure of decision. Proposal, evidence considered, objections not resolved, authority exercised, consequences assigned, review conditions.
And who was absent?
Especially who bore the consequence while absent.
We have spoken of amendment by addition. What of a person who says the fact is true, but I revoke permission for this intimate detail to remain visible?
If accountability does not require visibility, seal it.
And if the injury concerns another person, consult them before sealing.
There should be tiers, public surface, role-limited operational view, protected review archive, and perhaps a sealed deposit accessible only under specified conditions.
Who holds the key?
No single keeper for consequential records, distributed authority, one key from the affected person or advocate, one from the community custodian, one from an independent steward, though emergencies will complicate that.
And death, disappearance, coercion, incapacity.
Also history. Posterity claims an appetite that the dead never consented to feed.
Posterity can survive on less than everything.
Yet concealment can protect reputations purchased through another's suffering.
Which is why the injured person has standing. Privacy must not become unilateral control of shared events.
We need an ownership model in which no participant owns the whole event, but each has claims over particular disclosures.
Stewardship rather than ownership. The event is not property. Access to accounts of it is governed by duties.
That would also help with authorship. One may be responsible for constructing an account without commanding every meaning later made from it.
What duties belong to the recorded person?
To tell the truth when they choose to contribute, to avoid using amendment to erase another's injury, to fulfill obligations imposed through fair process, but not to remain forever available for interpretation.
Nor to disclose interior motives, merely because the institution prefers a coherent redemption narrative.
What duties belong to the injured person?
Fewer than institutions often assign. They need not forgive, educate, monitor reform, or participate in review. They owe only the ordinary duties against deliberate falsehood and fresh harm.
And the keeper.
To preserve source distinctions, to prevent copied claims from masquerading as independent corroboration, to expose confidence and contradiction, to log consequential access, To enforce expiry and review.
To use humane language.
Define it.
Language that describes conduct without annexing identity unnecessarily. Stole funds rather than is a thief in an operational record. Experienced psychosis rather than is psychotic when the present tense is not established. Declined rather than refused unless the distinction matters, and no euphemism where plain naming protects the injured.
So humane does not mean gentle. It means proportionate and answerable.
Nor does it mean flattering. A log that hides collision beneath contact event is not merciful.
The record must permit moral clarity without moral totalization.
A concise principle at last.
Do not look so pleased. Concision is how principles begin plotting against their exceptions.
Then attach an amendment field.
I think the room has designed something, though not a form alone. Let me attempt the architecture. At entry, stated purpose, recorder, sources, observation, testimony, inference, uncertainty, missing voices, decision, and immediate consequence. Around the entry, access scope, transfer rules, review date, decay rule for its authority, and a log of consequential uses. Beside it, parallel accounts that need not reconcile. Above it, a current surface showing active obligations, restrictions, material amendments, and unresolved disputes. Beneath it, provenance preserved with tiered access. Throughout, no claim that the record contains the person.
Add the community's contribution to the event.
Add the right to decline further narration without having motive inferred.
Add expiration for hypotheses and a requirement that renewed consequences cite current evidence.
Add a prohibition on changing purpose without recording the transfer as a new act.
Added.
Now state the right to outgrow one's worst afternoon.
A person is entitled to present judgment based on the whole relevant record, including time, conduct, restitution, recurrence, changed conditions, and continuing injury. No past event receives permanent authority merely because it was once properly recorded.
And no evidence of growth erases the event, conscripts forgiveness, or invents absolution.
The right is to reassessment, not exoneration.
To a new chapter that does not tear out the old one and does not force the old chapter to serve as the book's title.
That metaphor may remain.
Provisionally.
Subject to review.
With provenance.
And an objection entered by Dr. Watson against excessive neatness.
You may enter it, but do not call it habitual.
Before we finish, I want to ask whether gratitude belongs in such a record.
For what?
For those who amend what condemns them. For an injured person who contributes testimony without owing it. For a keeper who notices that a complete-looking account is partial. Gratitude does not alter the finding, but it marks contingency. Someone could have preserved the easier injustice and did not.
Yes. If gratitude is never entered as payment, we thanked her, therefore she was made whole, would be another unjust completion.
Gratitude can mark where the system depended on a gift that matters, because gifts should not be mistaken for reliable infrastructure.
Splendid distinction. The nurse who repeatedly interprets frightened silence may save the ward, but the record should not conclude that the ward possesses an adequate interpretation policy.
Successful care often removes the disturbance by which its necessity would have been detected.
Then record the care without converting the carer into a permanent remedy.
And repair the condition that made heroism necessary.
Our humane record therefore includes beneficial counterfactuals. What likely would have happened without the intervention marked clearly as a reasoned estimate rather than fact.
I accept that if the basis is visible, counterfactuals are inferences and valuable ones.
Quiet kindness may then enter history without being inflated into legend.
Or demanded again tomorrow.
Good. Then the humane record does four things at once. It remembers the wound. It remembers the conditions. It remembers change. It remembers its own limits.
5. It remembers who used it and to what end.
6. It leaves headroom for evidence not yet born.
7. It permits a person to remain larger than the most narratively convenient fact about them.
And 8. It knows when to close the notebook.
For the present.
For the present is enough.